So we are on unit 7. This is lecture 4. So we're continuing on with personality, theories of personality. We've talked extensively about Freud and psychoanalytic theory, that it's your id, ego, superego, these uncontrolled, unresolved issues from your childhood, usually quite negative. We talked about the psychodynamic theory of the neo-Freudians who say yes, but our unconscious is very similar to others. So we have this sort of collective unconscious, and it's not all about sex as a driving factor. Then we briefly looked at the humanistic perspective, which was a much more positive. You're just trying to be the best you can be. And in order to do that, you have to come to terms with all of your good, but all your bad. Because unless you know what your flaws are, you can't improve it. You know what's wrong with the car before you can fix it. But at the same time, don't be too hard on yourself. You fix up your car doesn't mean you're going to be a Lamborghini. Next, we're going to talk about, or not, the next lecture, we'll talk about the social cognitive perspective, which is how others sort of impact our personality. But here we're going to take a look at what is called the trait perspective. What are your personality traits, and how do we discover what those are? All right. So in order to understand the origin of this, let's talk about the story of Gordon Alpert. Gordon Alpert, back in 1919, during the Chicago White Sox World Series scandal, he was a patient of Sigmund Freud, ironically enough. He was a patient of Freud, and he went to Freud one morning, afternoon, I don't know what it was, but he told Freud a story about a boy he had seen on the ferry earlier that day. If you're unfamiliar, a ferry, you park your car on it, boat takes you across a river, lake, whatever, drops you off. You can stay in your car, get out and have a seat. So he's taking this ferry across this body of water. And as he's sitting down, he notices this little boy, and he tells Freud this story. He goes, I'm watching this little boy. And this little boy was just paranoid of germs, very upset about anything that was touching his skin that was not his own clothes. He would avoid the pole, he would avoid touching the chair, he would pull up his sleeves and just not want to touch anything. And it really gave him a sense of anxiety, and he seemed to be freaking out. And he kind of looked to his mother for help and guidance, but his mom, obviously, by this point, had just sort of learned to accept and just goes, it's my boy, and he freaks out about stuff. And so mom really didn't pay him too much of a mind. And the more that his mom sort of ignored his pleas and anxiety, the more anxious that he became. And so the guy, Gordon Alpert, tells Freud, he goes, I was just, why was this kid acting this way? What do you think caused that? And why do you think that his mother rejected? How bad do you think it was until mom just decided to suddenly not deal with this kid anymore? And when he tells the story and he asks Freud that question, Freud looks at him very deeply with his little cigar and he goes, so was that little boy you? And Gordon Albert's like, no, it's not me, you quack. I saw some guy on a boat, some kid on a boat whose mom's ignoring him. Not everything's about me. All right. It's not my mother. It's fine, or maybe not fine, but whatever. But he just looked at this and he goes, he's digging too deep. Not everything I observe is about me. If I see a couple of guys that are gay and in love, and I go, well, look at that couple. They seem very happy. Do you wish you were gay? No, I'm happy for their happiness. Not everything is about, well, why are you getting so loud about it? Not everything has these sort of deep, dark secrets. Not some of it, what you see is what you get. We're very much kind of who we are on a conscious sort of level. You don't need to peel the onion too deeply to kind of figure out some people are jerks, some people are nice, some people are shy, some people need the attention of everyone, and we can see it. It's right there. So the trait perspective basically says that you kind of say who you are. Here's a test. In this situation, how do you act? In this situation, how do you act? In this situation, how do you act? And it gets all of your personality traits. And with that, it's a pretty good predictor of how you'll act in certain sort of situations. And as with most other theories of development, most trait perspectives believe that 50% of it is how you were born and 50% of it was your environment. So then these traits are taken into account, and then you're given a certain personality type. Okay. Now, these traits are hypothesized at predicting behavior. They do not explain it. It does not explain why you are a shy person. It does not explain why you are a neat freak. It doesn't explain why you are brave in what situations or your nervousness or whatnot. It doesn't explain how you got there. It just says, here's who you are. And since now I know who you are, I can pretty much predict how you'll act in a specific situation. So even though Albert and his boys don't come up with this until the mid 20th century, this has been around forever. The Greeks used to talk about personality types, and they had four. You were either depressed, cheerful, unemotional, or irritable. A lot of fun the Greeks were. If you're not cheerful, you're depressed, unemotional, or irritable. But this idea of having these different traits is very, very common. And when you look at it, they try to put your personality type, if you would, somewhere on this graphic, which basically says there's two sort of main axes of personality. One is, are you an introverted person who sort of wants to stay to yourself, or are you an extroverted person who has to be around other people? Now, something we got to get out of the way of saying is a lot of times we assume that introverted people are very shy people and insecure people, and that's why they say for themselves, which is not necessarily true. There are introverts who are narcissists. There are introverts who stay to themselves because everybody else they find annoying. And I don't even want to deal with those people. So I'm just going to stay to myself. And there are also extroverted people that are on stage performing that are some of the most insecure people on the planet. And the reason they're on stage is because they're going, do you like me? Please say you like me. Please applaud. Please give me affirmation. Oh, it was so sad. You know, so there's that as well. All right. So where do you fall on that axis? And then your personality, is it stable or is it unstable? And stable means that your personality traits are very similar no matter what situation you're put in. Are you with family? Are you with friends? Are you with at work? Are you, at school? Your personality stays pretty consistent no matter the environment. That's a stable personality. An unstable personality means the situation you're in, who's around you, whatnot, has a great determinant of the personality traits that you do in fact show. All right. So with that being said, there are biological influences of these factors. Again, extroverts seek stimulation because their normal brain arousal level is low. They kind of need a little bit of a brain jump start. Pay attention to me, look at me, whatnot. PET scans show that the part of the frontal lobe involved in behavior inhibition is more active in introverts. Introverts, whether they're insecure and shy or whether they're narcissists, are constantly thinking, if I do this, then they'll do this, and how will they react to this, and do I want to get involved in this? So they tend to, play it out a lot more in their mind, and sometimes get so locked up in their mind that they can't take action. I'm a little bit of an introvert myself. And I just thought of this one situation where I was at dinner with my wife and two of her friends, and there were some other family members there or whatnot. And there were like three conversations. My wife and the two friends were having a conversation, and my son was having a conversation with my son-in-law, and my other son was having a conversation with my daughter. So everybody was involved in the conversation except me. So I just sat there, and rather than get involved because their conversation seemed nice and everything else, so I go, well, I don't want to break up any conversation because they seem to be having a good time. So I sat there just kind of quiet. And before I know it, that quietness went from 4 minutes to 5 minutes to 6 minutes. And then everyone's kind of looking at me like, why am I being so quiet? And now I'm like, oh, wow, now everyone's looking at me because I'm being quiet. Now I'm aware of my quietness. So now I've got to say something, but I really don't want to interrupt these conversations. And now I got to come up with an excuse of why I'm being quiet when in reality, I just want everyone else to have a conversation. Now they're sort of really looking at me and I'm sort of putting on a mood and now I'm getting angry at myself. Why don't you talk? And so all this crap's going on inside of my head. That's an extrovert. I'm sorry, that's an introvert. An extrovert will just because they think they're adding so much to the equation or they just need that judgment. So there's also cultural influences of these factors. Individualistic cultures are going to lead more reward to an extroverted personality type. They like that. But if you are of a collectivist culture, you don't want to stand out. You don't want to stick out. So there's all these sort of cultural factors as well as inside biological factors that can influence our personality. So how do we discover your personality? Well, you can take what is called, I got to get my hair cut here. You can take what is called a personality inventory. And a personality inventory is just a bunch of questions that you answer and it'll give you a personality type. Now, please don't confuse this with what you do on the internet. Which Disney princess are you? I'm telling you, you're not a Disney princess, okay? You're not a Jedi nor a Sith. You know, you're not any of these things because, again, they're terrible tests. Which Pixar character are you? No matter how you answer it, you're still a Pixar character. No matter how you answer it, you're still a princess. You know, do you like shorter men? Hey, look at me, I'm Snow White. You know, we're going to answer questions in a way where we know we want a specific answer. If I take a which Star Wars character are you, I'm going to do everything I can to become Han Solo, whether that's me or not. So again, that's another problem with the personality test is because since we know the questions, we sort of know the answers that we're sort of going for to get a certain sort of a result, okay? And a lot of times the test takers focus on more positive traits. So we're encouraged by the results. Are we putting out the true us or the idealized version of us when we're answering these particular questions? Most famous of these, and I actually did some research on this when I got my master's, was the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory, the MMPI. This is the most widely used researched test that is available. Now, it contains about, depending on which one you take, 400 to 700 true-false questions. And your job is to just basically, with each one, answer true or false. No explanation, no sort of context to put any of these questions in. And a lot of times these tests are used for things like screening, like, would you be a good police officer? Would you be good in this type of career or whatever? So the great thing about this test is because they ask you so many questions kind of about the same thing and looking for consistency. When you take this test, you're going to get data. It's not 5 different psychoanalysts that you tell a story to and they have 5 different opinions on what you might be. You're going to get a number. Okay. Now, again, it's not guaranteed to be valid because we could always fake our answers. Because here's the thing, in a psychoanalytic test, you don't know what the questions are about. So it's hard for you to cover. But in a personality test, you know exactly what the questions are and that it's to reflect you. So your ego can get involved and your ego can sort of knock these questions down. And again, these are used tremendously in the business world. Many personality tests are used as a prerequisite in hiring practice to find employees who would make the best fit for the job. All right, the best fit for the job. Now, again, when you're taking a test to get a job, and I'm sure if you try to get a job at Target or you try to get a job at Chick-fil-A, you try to get a job at a lot of different stores, they go, we want you to take a personality test first to see if you are better suited for this, that, or the other thing. As a matter of fact, most companies invest 70% of their capital in human resources, in people. So as a businessman, I want to get the best people because it is an investment to train them, pay them, everything else, and they become the face of the company. So it seems like a pretty good idea. But then the question becomes, are you being honest? Are you being honest on the test? You know, when you're taking a personality test to get a new job at I don't know, HEB, I don't know if HEB requires it, but if one of the questions is, have you ever stolen from work? Well, I want a job. So am I going to tell these people whether or not I've stolen from work? And now again, if you took a pen home from work, you had to have a pen in your pocket, you took it home and you never took it back and returned it. Is that technically stealing? Of course it is. But is that the same as taking $200 out of the register? I mean, both of them would be true. Have you ever stolen from work? But there's context, there's levels, there's all these other sort of things. And, you know, do you like people? You know, if I want to be at the front counter of Chick-fil-A, I'm like, no, I hate people. Of course, I'm not going to put that because I want the job. So again, are you truly showing your personality when you're taking a personality test? These tests have been used to discriminate in hiring. Although they do not directly ask if you have a mental disorder, these tests can see whether or not you do. You know, these tests are designed, personality tests are designed to show people who have a tendency towards depression, anxiety, more likely to have schizophrenia, you know, just all sorts of other things can show up on these tests. And again, when you're answering the questions, are you answering them as the personal you, as the work you, as the relationship you, as the family you, as the school you, whatever? And if you did take this test, and if this test did display that you have tendencies to make you susceptible towards depression, and they see that and that's a red flag, and they decide not to hire you because of that score on there, that's against the law. It's a violation of the 1990s American with Disabilities Act. So you can make a solid argument these tests are inherently illegal. You know, to ask you these questions about yourself and your personality types and to go, oh, you're susceptible to depression, anxiety, whatever, that's no different than having an applicant who's Black and putting a B on there, or an applicant who's Hispanic and putting an H on there, or has an accent or whatever. You cannot discriminate in your hiring. Most test takers have trouble answering the questions personally versus professionally. And algorithms are primarily written by educated, middle-aged white guys. So obviously, when white people only make up 58% of the population, I think I saw the 2020 census recently come out, you know, and men are less than half of that, it's not really necessarily a proper algorithm. And also includes trick questions to see if you're being truthful. Can you recall telling a lie in the last 2 years? Well, should I tell them I'm a liar? Well, of course you've told a lie in the last 2 years. You know, so are you going to be honest in this? Some tests are now designed to interview an applicant by a computer camera. You know, so it's not just you on a computer, it's a computer camera. And they're going to notice, are your pupils a little bit bigger? Is your heart rate going up a little bit? Is there a little bit of perspiration? Are your eyes darting around the place? All of these things, because they want to see, are you being truthful or are you lying? But that's like hooking you up to a polygraph, which prior to 1988 they could do, but that's an illegal search. It's an illegal search to hook someone up to a polygraph for a test, but that's what these tests are doing. So again, trait personality tests can be fantastic if used for you as an individual trying to get whatever. But as far as job applications, they're in the courts right now of how legal they actually are. And at the same time, you apply for a job and they say, we want you to take a personality test. I refuse. Well, do we want to hire you? You know, and then there's another question of this. My wife was going to work for another builder, and they wanted her to take a personality test. But not only did they want her to take a personality test, they wanted me to take a personality test for her personality to see, do her answers about herself match up with my answers about her? And it all gets really, really sort of tricky, especially when you look at these questions. I see myself as someone who is depressed and blue. Folks, we can all feel depressed and blue at times. You know, it depends on what day you're asking me. It depends on what time you're asking me. Did I have lunch today? All these things can be somewhat careless. We can all be somewhat careless. Well, do I want to hire someone that's careless? You know, prefers work that is routine and simple, starts quarrels with others. Again, if I'm interviewing for a job, am I going to tell you that I start quarrels with others, that I worry a lot, that I'm moody, I'm lazy, I'm rude to other people? You know, I'm going to answer these in the way that you want me to be, which, by the way, we can put on a persona at work. a lot of us, the way that we act at work is not the way that we act at home. If you work at Chick-fil-A and then you come home and dad says, get me a beer, and you give him the beer and he goes, thanks. And you don't say, it was my pleasure. You know, that's fine, dad. Maybe you do. Maybe you get sort of trained and conditioned to do that as well. Look at some of these. I have not lived the right kind of life. That's a pretty deep philosophical question. Parts of my body often have feelings like burning, tingling, crawling, or like going to sleep. Schizophrenia is showing up right there. I see things or animals or people around me that others don't see. Again, this one, I loved my father. Not I love my father, I loved. So did me and dad have a fallout recently? You know, we could get very overwhelmed by these questions. But again, they're used as an overall, the more questions I ask, the more likely I am to get the correct answers. And they're used for situations like, let's take Ed, for example. Ed committed some whatever situation. So part of his parole was that he went to therapy and he had some improved, characteristics in his life. Okay, and so you got, this is Ed on all the different levels of the MMPI with an average score of 50 for each of these things. The blue line shows Ed before his treatment and the red line shows him after. Prior to Ed's treatment, his depression, more susceptible to depression, overly masculine, aggressive as well, a little bit of paranoia. Oh, I'm sorry, his paranoia was a little bit low, but his anxiety was high, which is strange, paranoia high, anxiety high, paranoia kind of average, still all above 50, and also a little bit shy as well. So then Ed goes to treatment for a few weeks and he takes another test, and look, his scores all just dramatically go down. And he's now in the sort of the average, the money section right here. So we go, well, the treatment was great for Ed, right? Or did Ed learn how to take a test? Oh, if this is what you want me, if this is what you want to hear, it's what I'll tell you. I mean, how many times have you been yelled at by your parents and you're just like, whatever you want me to say, tell me, I'll say it. It doesn't mean you've changed or you're sorry or you've learned a lesson. You just want out of it, Now, again, one of the most famous of these personality tests is what's called the Myers-Briggs personality test. This is the one that you do on the internet. And which Muppet character are you? Sort of a thing. Which president would you be? Which Marvel character are you? Which Disney villain are you? Which member of Grey's Anatomy character are you? So these are very pop culture-y. And what it basically does is it asks you a series of questions. It's either true, false, or you do it on a scale depending on which one you take. The trick with Myers-Briggs is that this test was never copyrighted. So I could make a Myers-Briggs test if I want. So that's also why it's important when you do these things online. You take a lot of them, and the answer may be somewhere in the middle. But it just basically gives you one of 4 letters. Are you outwardly or inwardly focused? So what's your level of extroversion versus introversion? Do you prefer to take in information, or how do you prefer to take in information? And do you use intuition, things you've experienced from the past and put it out there, or sensing of what's going on and bring it in? How do you prefer to make decisions? Are you sort of a thinking person and you want to use logic, or more emotional and use feelings? How do you prefer to live your life in one of perception or one of judgment? Now, what's interesting about this test is people will get 4 letters and go, I'm an ENTP, or whatever the case may be. But that's not usually correct, because again, this is on a scale of like 0 to 100. I's over here, E's over here, and you can be a 52 over towards E, which means you're just barely an E. You answer this question is a little bit different, suddenly you're an I. So now again, if you're in the 80s, 90s on one thing, or the 10 to 20 on the other thing, you're a definite I, or a definite S, or a definite F, as opposed to sort of a TF. After a 5-week gap, 50% of people who take this personality test come back and their personality type is different. So it's not a good sort of sensitivity thing. It is a good predictor of how you'll answer questions, not necessarily a good predictor of how you're going to act, but it can predict how you'll answer certain questions, but not necessarily how you'll act once answering them. So again, Myers-Briggs, very pop culturally out there. And then so the question becomes, the people who originally came up with the test, who are they? Catherine Briggs and Isabella Myers-Briggs. Catherine Briggs was a kind of stay-at-home mom, gave birth to 3 children. Only one of them, Isabella, survived. So obviously, this one child gets all of her attention. So she dedicated her life to be around this child, study this child, and study the personality of this kid as she was developing. She had no formal education, but was a huge, huge fan of Carl Hume. And she wanted to take what she learned about her daughter and help companies hiring in post-World War II America, which again is a great idea for a personality test. Let's see people who would be better in infantry, some people would be better in office, whatever. And she basically felt if people came like shoes with a label, then you could avoid a painful fit. This person's a size 11. This person's a size 7. This person's a size 6. And then we could put the right people in the right positions and it would seem to be great. But again, she never copyrighted her work. So most modern tests that say they're Myers-Briggs aren't necessarily Myers-Briggs. And again, the criticisms of this is every personality type has a positive spin. And we tend to agree with it because it's a test we took about us. You know, she would not test those with an IQ under 100 because she felt they didn't have enough of a cognitive ability to be tested. So you're telling me if you're under an average IQ, you have no personality. You know, she felt more intelligent people had more developed personalities, which of course is not true. She had separate standards for men and women. Of course, that's not true. Okay, so it's discriminatory against your people of certain intelligence. It's discriminatory between men and women. And she was also known to have written some racist mystery novels, one of them being about a murder mystery of somebody in the crowd went crazy because they had a drop of the slave's blood in them. So again, a little bit of racism there. Now, again, social media, pop culture have recently hijacked these letters again and figuring out which Disney princess are you, who are you most likely to be set up with, and all these other things. That's Myers-Briggs. What psychologists and psychotherapists tend to look more towards is what is called the Big Five. You can call it ocean because you can take the 5 letters and make ocean. You could also make canoe or take a canoe on an ocean, which I do not recommend. I tried that before. But this doesn't necessarily give you a type. It just goes, are you more this versus more that? You know, what is your level of openness? Are you a very conventional and curious person? You want to do things the same way all the time, or you want to find a new way of doing things? Conscientious, are you lazy and disorganized, or are you hardworking and punctual? You know, extroversion, are you to yourself, or do you always have to be around others? Agreeable, you know, are you very suspicious of everyone, or are you very trusting of everyone? Neuroticism, are you calm, unemotional, or always worried? And what we also have to keep in mind is there is no great personality. There's no best personality. You know, all it is your type. You know, and people go, well, I would want to have a high level of agreeableness. Not necessarily, because a person with a high level of agreeableness is also someone who's pretty gullible. You know, that's someone who's going to be sending a lot of money to an email that says you're going to free an African princess or something. That's not good. People with high levels of agreeableness correlate with negative financial outcomes, poor negotiating skills. Nice people have more debt. They don't save as much money. You know, neurotic. You know, I don't want to always be neurotic, yeah, but if you're always calm and unemotional and don't take precautions, you're more likely to get sick. You know, there's somewhat of a happy medium that we need to find within all of that. Now, again, as we said before, how stable is your personality when we evaluate the trait perspective? Averaging behavior across situations seems to indicate that people do have distinct personality traits. Okay, people tend to believe that the true them is hidden, so these tests will unlock the mystery to some secret untapped power. And we tend to agree with them because eventually we're the ones who took the tests. So of course we're going to agree with it. And again, a lot of these tests come back with messages that tend to be really sort of positive. Now, critics of this say it's easy for people to fake answers. We're putting out an idealized version of ourselves. Most of these questions have no context. And again, within 8 weeks, they could sort of be overrun as well. Many of the questions, again, situational, different situations are going to measure them differently. Which persona is being measured? Am I measuring this as a father, as a husband, as an employee, as a teacher? So there's all these different things that can sort of get in the way of it. Now, with that being said, what I'd like you to do with the next assignment, if you go to the next PowerPoint, is do a Myers-Briggs test. And there's going to be instructions there how to do it. The next The next PowerPoint will tell you how to do it. You can go to this website, 16personalities.com. There's plenty of apps for it, whatever. Go to the next PowerPoint. And if you can't read through it and understand it, there is a lecture of me, I think, going over it. All right.